welcome to this session. I'm Justine Simons. I am the Deputy Mayor for Culture and the Creative Industries. And it's a privilege to be moderating this important panel today. Our focus is the black music economy, a powerhouse that feeds and shapes the whole of UK culture, as well as having a major impact on the global stage. It's a success story that we are rightly proud of. But despite this incredible achievement, why then do we still see systematic discrimination? Why is there underinvestment, lack of opportunity, lack of leadership, lack of progression? This doesn't have to be the story. As my fellow panelists have shown, when there is leadership, sustained commitment, and investment, change can happen. So it's a privilege to share the stage with these leaders, all working tirelessly to create change. But there's a long way to go, and as the phrase suggests, systemic discrimination needs systemic change. And that means industry-wide, at all levels. It means all of us. So for our panel session today, we want to acknowledge these very real challenges. But we also want to inspire action in you, our audience. I hope that you will leave this room with more information and with more fire inside you to join our push for equality. So let's begin. I'm going to start with Dr. Charisse Beaumont, Chief Executive and co-founder of Black Lives in Music. Charisse, we all know that evidence is essential in creating change, and you have been leading incredible work developing research through Black Lives in Music. So my question to you is, how do we move from compelling evidence into real-life action?
Thanks, Justine. I'm just putting it out there. I'm a freestyler, quite relaxed. I hope you guys can all enjoy this session and end up supercharged, ready to do some work. To answer your question, Justine, Black Lives in Music, we gather data on a lived experience of people working in the music industry, whether you're black and disabled, whether you're a woman, various different pieces of research. And what we found, if we're working on research to do with a current hot topic, licensing, we're working with the GLA, the Mayor of London, the UK government, our recommendations go straight to the top. If it's something to do with the economy, something to do with money, they want to know. It's the same if we're doing something with women. Tomorrow we're going to drop we're not publishing a report, the government are publishing a report on the misogyny in music. We have contributed to that report, our research heavily on the lived experience of black women and women across the industry, looking at 61% of women face some form of bullying and harassment, 63% of black women, and across the board of our research that black women are the most disadvantaged in the music industry. We've given that information and gone straight to the top. It's at government level. But when we're talking about racism, systemic opportunities, pipeline to progression, seeing black people at senior leadership positions, strategic decision-making decisions, where's the galvanizing on that? Where's the government level on that? And that's what we need. We have the voices on our research. There's evidence for days. You're probably going to hear loads of stats today. But what we really need is people to drive behind our work, the work of others, to see systemic change. So we have the evidence now. Let's get it to the top so we can remove racism and every barrier that currently is working in the music industry.
Brilliant, thank you. Ben Wynter, you are co-founder of Power Up and the host of Be Unstoppable podcast. So one of the things you've spoken about is the importance of accountability, about moving accountability from an abstract concept into something that is practical and real. So what would get us there? What would get us there?
Thanks, Justine. For those that don't know, Power Up obviously is an initiative that was set up 5 years ago to support black talent to shatter the glass ceiling that exists in the UK music industry, and also to combat anti-black racism, which exists as well. Accountability is so important. It starts with self, and in order to overcome the barriers that black talent faces within this industry, it's about everybody taking accountability for what is actually going on. So that starts with, I use the term here, that, that starts with reflecting on white fragility and being willing to have uncomfortable conversations that can open up pathways to create opportunities and to diversify teams. If you look at the data shows that I think it's companies that are in the top quartile of ethnic diversity have 36% more profitability than those companies in the bottom quartile. So it actually pays to have extremely diverse, ethnically diverse leadership. The problem is, within the UK music industry, if we look across the major companies, we look across trade bodies, we look across the landscape, there's an extreme lack of ethnic diversity in senior leadership roles within that space. That's why we created Power Up. That's why it's so important for us to have that level of diversity. Hey. That's why it's so important for us to have that level of diversity at a senior level, and why it's so important to have those uncomfortable conversations and to take accountability for what isn't working within your organization to affect that change. Once you have those conversations, you can really, really start to make great things happen. We've seen it through Power Up. We've seen it through the organization that helped create Power Up, PRS Foundation, where Power Up was born out of. It was born out of PRS Foundation taking accountability for what it was that they weren't doing at the time and saying, actually, we don't necessarily know what we should be doing. Can you help? Can you guide us? And also, when we take missteps, can you tell us so that we can do better? And I think part of the problem is quite often there's a fear of getting it wrong, which leads to paralysis, which means nothing changes. And you have to have those uncomfortable conversations in order to affect that change.
Brilliant. Just writing these top tips down. Brilliant. Thank you. Shani Gonzales, Managing Director UK and Head of International A&R at Warner Chappell Music. You bring quite a unique perspective, having worked both in the UK and the US industries. What can we learn from each other, do you think?
I think that for me, I've been in this country now close to 4 years. And it has always struck me, some of the problems here. It never occurred to me that I couldn't be where I am because I came up with mentors who looked like me and who came from where I came from. One of the things that, and I'm not an American that romanticizes America. I'm very clear about our deficits. I know we have Donald Trump. I'm not proud. I'm begging to stay here right now. But my point is, things don't feel impossible when you have people around you who show you that it is. And, I was fortunate enough to come up with, or not come up with, but come up and see examples. I worked for L.A. Reid for a long time. I saw, when I was in school still, I saw what Jay-Z and Damon Dash did with Rockefeller. I saw Irv Gotti and Murder, Inc. I saw so many examples of Black people who were controlling their narrative, who had ownership, and who were going, like, there was insane rags to riches stories. And here, unfortunately, this is where I'm American, I'm a bit radicalized. Sometimes I came here in 2021. I was asked to do this job in March of 2020. It was before George Floyd. But here, when I got here, everyone assumed I was here as a response to George Floyd. I found that insulting. And there was also a time here when it felt like a lot of unprepared young Black employees were quickly being ascended to executives. They were being ascended without mentorship and without people to guide them. And now when I look around, less than 5 years later, they're not in those positions. I'm grateful that I came up. I got screamed at by L.A. Reid, and I got screamed at by Sylvia Rohn, and I got screamed at by a community of people who were the village that raised my career. And I feel like here, I pay my Black tax all the time. I will take any meeting with any young Black executive, anybody that wants to be in this business, because I know the value of that. And it's just unfortunate that there aren't a lot of people like me in the position that I'm in, and that can also nurture and help to develop. I'm not here because I knew everything. I'm here because people checked me and championed me and told me the truth, even when it was hard to say. They weren't polite all the time. And they had ownership over my career and my success. And it was important for them that there were people that continued the legacy of Black storytelling, Black ownership, and Black success, quite frankly. I think here, I'm always struck by how little that happens, and how competitive we are as Black people with each other. I'm rooting for everyone Black. I say it all the time. I'm rooting. I don't care if you're at Sony or you're at Universal, one of my competitors. They're not competitors, we're winning. Anyway, though, I really don't care. I want every Black executive to make it. There's certainly not enough. And I wish that I understood how grateful that I should have been when I lived in America. It seemed possible to me because I had seen it so many times. And here it is something that makes me really concerned and sad.
Yeah, thank you. Welcome, Sheryl Nwosu. You are co-founder and executive member of the Black Music Coalition. And you want to talk about systematic change.
Yes.
We know that systemic change is essential in achieving equality. So, love your thoughts on where it's been going wrong, and conversely, what would success look like?
Okay, so for me, in this whole issue, going back to where we started with the Black Squares, Blackout Tuesday, if I were a pessimist, or some might say a realist, that should have been my first inkling that it was always going to go wrong. Because systemic change involves root and branch change. And now, in hindsight, it's really difficult to align post in a black square without any follow-on to really meaning that you want to undergo root and branch change. So that's the first point about systemic change. Where's it gone wrong? Well, it started wrong. And in fairness, it may be because, I often tell people who engage in conversations with me to stop. You don't have the range. You need to go away and do some reading. And I say that because it's not an issue that we can afford to mess up when we're having conversations. And so when we passed Blackout Tuesday and people were saying that they were listening and learning, one then has to figure out what was the learning process. And I think that's what hasn't happened. And to your point, that's what went wrong. Because what I've realized, I was thinking about this panel, and I was thinking about all the organizations, and I was thinking about the concept of systemic change, right? So if you think about there's a system, okay, and a system is failing because of systemic failures, so failures in all components of that system, the only thing to call for is systemic change. And when I thought about what each of our organizations and Shani as an individual does, again, there's still a gap, and that gap is systemic change. So in reality, if I talk about the Black Music Coalition, we advocate for individuals, for Black executives. We encourage clicking up. We empower them through that. We empower them through knowledge, through resources. And then some of the discrete projects we do are designed to maintain their legacy, educate them about their legacy, and of course, the overarching task of, you know, calling the industry to account and asking for change. So that's our role. So if you might think about us and working with individual Black execs. And then I was thinking about Black Lives in Music, spearheaded by Charisse, and thinking about how they have made massive roads in collating data about the issues which we all know exist already, right? But doing that as a means to part of that journey to tackling the issues which, once underwritten with data, become irrefutable. Okay, there's a lot more to Blim, but that was a standout thing for me, right? So that is almost putting eyes on the system and calculating the results of its systemic failures and quantifying the results of its systemic failures. And then you have Power Up, of which the Black Music Coalition are very, very proud supporters, because in my view, Power Up is one of the things that work. But still, when I was thinking about the Power Up program, it's almost like employing a cheat code to jump over some of the systemic barriers that the people who join Power Up, who are selected for Power Up, have faced, right? Yep. So you've got advocating for individuals, getting the data, making it know that the systemic failures are there, cheat code, getting people over those obstacles that they've faced. And then you have Shani as an individual who, the reason why I want to focus on individuals is because you often have individuals who, through their own passion, their own experience, their own backgrounds, take on some of the heavy lifting of going to bat for their colleagues, encouraging that clicking up, you know, being that sometimes solo voice, but certainly being a loud voice about the issues. That's too much of a burden to bear when it's versus a system with systemic issues. And so if you consider everything that organizations have done since 2020, the resounding question remains, what has the system done? What has the system done? And I think when we look there, my view is very little.
Yep. Thank you.
So what does success look like?
Give a round of applause for that. Definitely a lot.
Success looks like the radical stance, raise it to the ground and start again. Success looks like perhaps the less radical stance of come to the table, leave your black squares at home, but come with solutions. And if you haven't got solutions, we have. So how comes you haven't been reaching out? That's, to me, those are the only real routes to success, because my confidence is at an all-time low that the system will change itself.
Just to add to that, I also think it's really important that as individuals, speaking as individuals, non-black individuals, it's really important to pick up the mantle individually within your organization and to take responsibility for what you can do, because you'll be surprised at what you're able to change as an individual by speaking out, by speaking up, by being an ally. Allyship is so important. Power Up doesn't exist without allyship. It really doesn't. From my co-founder Joe to various people that have been important. I can see one in this room right now who were key to us getting various funding off the ground, because they took individual responsibility and decided to become allies to something that they knew was unjust. And that's the only way you start to get change, if we come together. If you leave it to someone else, you go, well, actually, that's not my problem. That's for my boss, or that's not my problem. Someone else will do it. Nothing will change. You're actually perpetuating the problem that already exists.
Yeah.
You might not think you are, but you actually are. So it's so important that you actually look within and say, actually, what am I doing to affect change? What am I doing to help create systemic change? What am I doing to put pressure on my team, my bosses, to speak up when I see injustice? What am I doing? And I think if you leave today with one question in your mind, I'd love you to leave with that question, which is, what am I doing?
Good, very good. Thank you. All right, we've got a couple of minutes left, so we're just going to go around with some quick fires, try and answer some quick fire questions. I can start with Shani. What would you do differently? If you had to pick one thing.
There's so much. I think I said that you could ask that question, and now I think
I know,
I'm
now
mad.
you're regretting it.
I think there's so much. I think to your point, it needs to be more, one of my criticisms of living, I'm American, I'm from New York. Like, fuck America, I'm from New York. And we are brash, and we are aggressive, and even me on a good patient day looks crazy to British people. And I one of the things that drive me crazy here is the politeness, and the politeness that is
So be less
is
polite.
to the point of like passive aggression.
Honestly.
Politeness. It pisses me off with my A&R teams. Like I came up in a culture where you're like, that sucks, let's move on. And here that doesn't happen. And I think that politeness is so pervasive that it is destroying us, particularly when we have these conversations. Most of my team is white, and I have no problem talking about race regardless of the room I'm in.
Yep.
You will know that I'm a black woman, you will know that I'm proud to be that, and you will know what the problems that I think we have by not having enough black people at the table. And I think that that's one of the things that opens up real and honest and transparent conversation. What pissed me off the most in not just the George Floyd period, I moved here in 21, so like not just that, I came here after, but like it became incumbent upon me, the victim, to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I wasn't given extra hours in my day.
No.
I came here to be the managing director. It was a huge jump in my career. I was moving to another country. I got COVID like 12 times. I had no furniture. It was just like on and on and on. But it's like, by the way, what should we say to them? I'm like, who the fuck is them? Like, and why are you asking me? I don't know what to say because it's been done to me just as badly, right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't understand why the change in the behavior wasn't expected of them, I guess I should say, but it was expected for me to deliver the problem. I did not cause the problem. I'm not a part of the problem, but I have to tell you the solution to the problem. That's ridiculous. And I think that kind of sentiment persists. There are a lot of times when if there's a black problem, I get called in. There are not enough hours in my day, and still I have to make up all this time to help solve some of these problems. So I think that needs to change.
Yeah, very good.
And I think that the responsibility to change, to your point, needs to be held far more on the other side and less with this group of people.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we're nearly out of time.
Sorry for
now, so I'm just
cursing.
going to actually ask Charisse your question. Follow up. So, despite the very deep challenges, is there anywhere you see hope?
Without sounding cliche or corny, it's actually in this room. That's my hope. I'm old,
You are not old.
I am
You are
old.
not old.
And we're talking about passing on the mantle. We're talking about the ideas. We're here, South by Southwest, the ideas. It's in this room. Change is in this room. Change specifically regarding anti-black racism is in this room. That's my hope.
Great.
that we can together make a difference and make change. So specifically, if you need me not to be so vague, we do reporting. We've got recommendations for days. Read one of our reports. Specifically, you've heard from all of us, speak, engage with these organisations, and we can help you make a difference.
Yeah.
But the hope is in this room.
Fantastic. All right, so we're almost there. We're out of time. So thank you all for sharing your incredible experience and insights. I'm going to do my best to kind of capture some of them. 10 things we learned.
Thank you.
I'm going to give it a go. 1, we need people to get behind it. We need all the voices. 2, accountability starts with self. What am I doing? 3, don't be afraid to get it wrong because that leads to paralysis. 4, things don't feel impossible when you have people around you to show it how it can be. 5, systemic change. Have your eyes on the system. Think about it in a 360 way. Mentorship, leadership, bringing the data. 6, come with solutions. Leave your black squares at home. 7, allyship is essential. 8, be less polite. 9,
That's so true.
hope is in this room. And 10, thank you all our amazing panelists. That's it, it's a wrap.